Potential Islamic State threats against North Americans in Afghanistan are forcing the U.S. military to develop new ways to get evacuees to the airport in Kabul. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, officials say it's becoming even more complicated to get so many thousands out of the country after its swift fall to the Taliban. And U.S. President Joe Biden said 11,000 people have been airlifted from Kabul in a 36-hour period over the weekend.
Yes, but experts are warning that, as you said, Hal, this is mathematically impossible to get the rest of those who need to be taken out of Afghanistan out by the deadline, which is the end of this month of August. That's why we heard President Biden say that he may have to extend that deadline, to which there was a swift response by the Taliban, who said, no way, Jose, which is interesting. Let's see what the reaction will be from the White House. This is going to be extremely important. As you know, how this is being criticized across the political spectrum here in the United States. It's being criticized by world leaders in Europe and all over. But I think the next 2 weeks to a month, the posture, the positioning that the United States takes with regards to the Taliban is going to be very important. Now, remember, the Taliban has attempted to have a new face, to be more moderate, to use their PR machine, social media accounts and such, to say we're different. We're going to give women rights. We're going to, be different. This is not the same Taliban of the 90s, but they're already showing us their true colors. Women have been told not to go to work in certain sectors, and women have been told not to go to university in other provinces rather. So we know that they're going to play by their true colors, and this is going to be a mess. But yes, we are first and foremost prioritizing those who need to get out of the country, because we don't want to have another hostage crisis on our hands, depending on how this escalates.
So how can American and Canadian forces ensure that they're not jihadists posing as refugees as many of these planes are being loaded up? Is there any time to vet anyone?
No, and the reason being that, obviously the priority is to get them out, and I'm sure you've seen the images from the tarmac as to the chaos that is at the airport. So what they're doing is the planes that are coming out are stopping at other air bases. Germany, for example, is one of them. These individuals are then being vetted there. What to do with an individual that you find that cannot be properly vetted? I don't know. Have they even found individuals that are being flagged? I don't know. Look, here we have the biggest crisis at our southern border. We're not vetting anybody, not for COVID and not for more nefarious things. So, this is just one big mess. Obviously, we're hoping to get these people out. We know that obviously, not not only bad actors, but good actors who just want to get out of Afghanistan. They were willing to risk their lives, and many did, to hold on to a part of an airplane that was taking off. So, we know that they're desperate to get out, and we know that they want help to get out. We're going to have a huge crisis on our hands with regards to refugees with nearby countries and Europe, and of course, those who want to come to the United States. And of course, we have to, take a reevaluate the situation as time goes on.
Yeah, tragedy at the Kabul airport as 7 Afghans were tragically killed trying to flee the country, including an interpreter's daughter, Lisa, who was trampled in a crowd at the airport. The little girl was just a toddler.
Yeah, this was such a sad story, because we know that people died at the airport from a couple of different reasons. One was the airplane that took off, and many people died. I think 7 died there. Then you also had some gunfire between the Afghan security forces and the Taliban, in which there were some casualties, and now people being trampled just because of the sheer numbers. And obviously, the saddest part here is watching the footage of babies and toddlers and other children that are really being exposed to this, and in worst cases dying, being trampled to death because they are just trying to get out. This interpreter's daughter, it's a very sad story. You can read it in the New York Post and other outlets, but there's so many of these cases, and so many of these babies that are being either kidnapped or killed, or in many cases, just this is they're being exposed to things that they shouldn't be exposed to as children. So it's awful.
There's also a beautiful story of an Afghan woman giving birth to a baby girl on board a U.S. evacuation plane.
Yeah, this was a very interesting story. Imagine being so pregnant that you're almost in labor, and you take off. And apparently, she started having contractions and complications. And the pilot, God bless him, was seasoned enough to descend the plane a drop so that she can get more air pressure, and therefore saved her life, saved the baby's life.
Wow.
They landed at an air base in Germany. That's where the plane was headed. And of course, emergency personnel were called on board as soon as they landed, and the baby was born right then and there, ready to pop out, and a happy ending to a very, very talk about interesting birth stories, right? These Western moms like to write their birth stories for their babies about how they got to the hospital and how long they were in labor for. Well, that mom has a very interesting story to tell her baby.
Absolutely. Now, an Afghanistan war veteran, Lisa, says hundreds of thousands of people are using satellite imagery to locate Taliban checkpoints surrounding the airport in Kabul as evacuation orders continue to get a lot of the Afghan interpreters out of the country.
Yes, so there is just such a dichotomy of of just commands going on right now. So people are being ordered to go to the airport. Especially if you're near Kabul, the directive has been head to the airport, and that was the case for at least the first 2, 3, 4, 5 days after the Taliban took over the capital in Kabul. Then the word got out, obviously, when they're making these kinds of announcements, that the streets leading up to the airport are being lined by Taliban fighters. And not only that, the perimeter of the airport is being surrounded by Taliban fighters. So the airport is definitely not the safest place to go for these individuals, particularly women and children who are being stopped. So now they're using other means and technologies to try to locate these Taliban fighters so that people can work around them. As I said before, how people are desperate. They're going to do whatever they can to work around these Taliban fighters, to work around the Taliban rule, to get out of the country. And really, our hearts go out to those who are going to remain in the country, because if anyone knows the wrath of the Taliban, it's the Afghan people who have had to deal with them for decades. It's not anything new to them, but now they're in charge. They're leading a country. Their flag is up. They own the military. They own the weapons, and they're not going to be afraid to use them.
You know, absolutely. In a week after the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan, many people, as you mentioned earlier, are really struggling right now. Many of the women lost their jobs. Many people have lost their jobs. The jobs are gone, banks are closed, and food prices are soaring.
Soaring. It's a crisis. A crisis, and it's spiraling out of control as we speak. And now imagine this society in which a terror organization has taken over. Women who have been educated and are lawyers and doctors and working in all sorts of sectors of society are going to be forced to stay home. They cannot leave home without a male escort, even to go to a doctor's appointment. Women cannot go to school. So think about all these women who are being educated, being told, drop out of college. You can't attend university classes anymore. And to what end? You're going to have a society that is obviously patriarchal, obviously ruled by Sharia law. We know what that means. We know that that means that a woman cannot file for divorce. We know that that means that a woman cannot have custody of her children, that her testimony in court will be equivalent to half of that of a man's. Look, if you don't believe what I'm saying, look at the people in Iran and what they're living under. That's Sharia law. And you know what, Hal? I've just been saying this all throughout all my TV appearances. It's how devastated we were in the aftermath of 9/11 when you had a terror organization that only had a cave at its disposal, and then how upset we were with ISIS in 2014 when you had a terror organization that had maximum 50, 60, 70,000 fighters and was had pockets in Syria and Iraq. Now you have a terror organization that has an entire country at its fingertips, all the resources, the money, the banks, as you said, the military, the weapons, the schools, everything. The entire country and its influence is under a terror organization. So it's going to get much worse for the people in that country, and that's why they're headed to the airport.
You know, Lisa, and hundreds of Afghans who were employed to guard the British embassy until last year fear that they will be killed by the Taliban after they feel that they've been abandoned by the British.
Right, and that's a huge angle here. All the people who were helping the Europeans and the Americans and the Canadians, they feel as though we owe them, right? So if they were interpreting, or they were helping with security, or they were helping us with logistics on the ground and interpretation and everything else, well, they were assisting us in exchange for protection. And what do we have to give them? Protection. So abandoning these individuals is not an option. And if it is, it's going to be a huge, huge scar and stain on our reputations as Western leading nations. Of course, all of our leadership is called into question, particularly that of President Biden for withdrawing without a plan. And let's not conflate the issues. It's not whether we should have withdrawn or not. It's in the manner in which we did, which was without any strategy, without fortifying our own assets and our own personnel, getting them out of the country first, without making sure that those weapons don't get into Taliban hands. And we didn't. And that's what it's going to come down to. And that's how this should be remembered in history as the way in which this was carried out.
What's also really scary right now, we're receiving reports, Lisa, that the Taliban is now going door to door looking for Christians to kill and others who oppose the Taliban.
Again, I'll say the preview to all this is under the Iranian regime. It's exactly what they do, where Christians are forced underground because they cannot practice openly, because that is what Sharia law dictates, that you have to kill a kafir. Kafir in Arabic means one who is blaspheming, or a blasphemous person, one who goes against the Quran, especially if you are a Muslim who has converted to Christianity. There's that's punishable by death, because you actually abandoned, or you turned your back on the Quran or on Islam. If you are a practicing Christian, meaning an Assyrian or an Armenian, then you can practice more freely than one who has converted. But how I'm not surprised by any of this. They will weed out, they will smell out anyone who has any opposing views, whether they be political or religious or social. They will sniff them out. And let's not fall for the PR machine that has come out to say the Taliban has a new face. Those are just talking points, and they unfortunately have platforms on American social media sites in order to come and spew this garbage. They shouldn't have these platforms. If our former president can't have a platform, they shouldn't have one either.
Now, your current President Joe Biden is meeting virtually with the G7 leaders to discuss plans to provide humanitarian aid and support for Afghan refugees. Lisa, Biden has held one-on-one phone conversations with British PM Boris Johnson, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, but nothing yet with Liberal leader Justin Trudeau.
Yes. Well, so far, Germany, the UK, and France are extremely, extremely upset and disappointed with Joe Biden. They've been very vocal about this. The G7 is not just to have a constructive talk, but they really want to grill him on what he was thinking and why this went the way that it went. Justin Trudeau, on the other hand, I don't know how he feels yet. We know how certain people feel, right? We know how our enemies feel. We know that the Iranian regime, Hamas, the Chinese, the uh, I'm sorry, the last terror organization, I want to say it's Palestinian Jihad, all have congratulated the Taliban to say, job well done, and to laugh at America and say, you lost this war against the Taliban. So this is another notch on their belt. Now, it will be extremely important going forward where leaders stand on this. We know that, as I mentioned, those three European nations that have expressed their disenchantment with the situation, how the United States handled this. And we're hoping that we get more support on this so that it pressures the White House to take a stand against the Taliban.
Now, Austria says it has a plan for the Afghan refugees and setting up deportation centers in countries neighboring Afghanistan so that the EU countries can deport Afghans who've been denied asylum even if they cannot be sent back to their homeland. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is interesting because how everyone wants to help them, the Afghan refugees, but nobody wants to absorb them. And it's understandable, right? It's understandable because we have such a migrant crisis already all around the world, with migrants from Syria and from Iraq and from all throughout the Middle East and elsewhere, looking for refuge for many reasons. And now the Afghan people, perhaps they should get priority because they are running away from the Taliban. But that doesn't change the reality on the ground, where the Europeans particularly the Europeans, don't want to absorb this many Afghans. They just don't have the resources for it, and they're still trying to absorb the many that came over from Northern Africa and the Middle East already. So now, this idea to set up these deportation camps is to try to have them stay in neighboring countries. I mean, it makes more sense, right? If you're indigenous to that part of the world, you do better in that part of the world. And hopefully, these deportation camps can help vet, they can help, resituate these individuals to places that perhaps would be more suitable for them.
Yeah, vetting is so key and so important, especially as we get so many refugees spread out around the world, right? Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.